frequency.
Frequency radio.
Broadcasting straight to you from a spaceship currently abducting the crew of the Marie Celeste off the Portuguese coast for future study. Just put them on ice. They'll keep. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Strange World, running 5 minutes late, where the truth is often stranger than fiction. I'm your host.
You better have that drink.
I'm your host, Mark Sargent, the creator of Flat Earth Clues, which propose that all of us are living, inside a Truman Show enclosed structure, thousands of miles wide. Check it out at enclosedworld.com or just Google or Flat Earth Clues. My good friend, personal wingman, and technical support for the show tonight is Jonathan from Jersey. How's it going, man?
Let me just start by saying this, Mark Sargent. I don't care if the Earth is flat or round. Obviously, we just went through the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah. We went through something just now because we're scrambling around trying to get the show going.
But I thought that was appropriate for our guests, Al.
It is appropriate right now. And I am very excited. Jonathan's excited because someone reached out to us this week. And I get a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails. And this guy, basically reached out and says, look, I'm in the military, and I might be able to help prove the Earth is not a globe, not a sphere. Could be flat, and he's got stuff to back it up. So it is my personal pleasure to introduce an active member of the United States Navy. His name is Robert. He is a NATO Sea Sparrow, and correct me as I'm doing this, NATO Sea Sparrow Surface Missile System Instructor. He's a Master Training Specialist. And he's here, tonight to confirm three things, for this movement. One is, from everything he has observed during the last tour, there is nothing, absolutely no curvature to the Earth that he can determine. Two, there is no Coriolis effect taken into account with the ranged weapon systems he has been working with over the years. Three, the navigation systems currently being used by the United States Navy on the high seas, when you compare them to basic trigonometry, and he'll break it down for you, seem to be completely wrong. And there's many other points besides that. And wow, I'm just blown away that he is here. Robert, are you there with us?
I am, Mark.
Fantastic. Well, do this for us, Robert. Let's get your credentials out of the way, and let's start from the beginning. When did you first enter the United States Navy?
I entered back in 2006 in June, right out of high school.
Cool.
And went to boot camp shortly after that in the middle of June.
Okay.
And after I finished my basic training, I went on to my A school, which was a pretty standard electronics course that dealt with a lot of basic troubleshooting, maintaining, repairing, whatnot. And that was out of Great Lakes, Illinois. And after that, I went on to my C school, which was more specified to a weapon system. As you said before, I work on NATO Sea Sparrow surface missile system. Mm-hmm. And after that, I was after that training, I was stationed on board the one of the amphibious assault ships at the time, where I did 5 years on board and worked with the system day in, day out.
And this was the Iwo Jima?
Yes, this was
Okay.
LHD-7 USS Iwo Jima, and
Okay.
afterwards, excuse me,
Uh-huh.
I went on to become an instructor, where I'm training the future fleet.
Fantastic. So how many years did you do on the and I, by the way, I've been boning up on this, on the WASP class Iwo Jima?
I
5.
did 5 years in total, yes.
And so and what you were talking to me about yesterday is you with the Navy, they do like 5 years on at sea and then several years on land.
Yes, they just rotate us back and forth.
Okay, cool. And then so for the last 3 years, you've been training people in the systems, in the Sea Sparrow systems that you've been that you learned for the last 5 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Definitely, it's been pretty fun so far. Good experience.
Fantastic. All right. So before we get to the confirmation of what we're really getting to the meat of it, what got you into how did you hear about this? How did you contact me? What led you down to this path?
I honestly, I was just kind of randomly going through different videos one day, and one of the videos I was watching, the host of it, he mentioned kind of in passing about this whole idea, this whole model of, everyone knows what we're here talking about tonight, the flat Earth,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was in the same crowd as everybody else at one point, where I was kind of, the naysayer, like, oh, let me go ahead and, show them all these quote unquote proofs that I have that makes them crazy. And,
So you started as a debunker like everybody else.
pretty much, I really, I came into it with a really bad attitude, basically going on, the lines of, oh, I already know this, I know because someone told me, with that attitude.
Wow. Amazing. And okay, and so then you were watching videos, and what was there a turning point? So you were looking into this for a while. It's not like you jumped on and because it's September and now you finally reach out to talk about this. What really started you down this? I mean, you obviously started doing little research things on your own.
The biggest thing that was really the turning point for me, personally, was one argument was brought forward that I could not ignore anymore, and the biggest one that it was the fact that when we look up at the night sky, we're supposedly a spherical Earth orbiting, the sun at 93 million miles away, where we take an orbit pattern of 350 million miles.
Yep.
And we never see any constellations in the sky merge across each other. There's no parallax shift with line of sight that we have with the constellations. And, when we're supposedly on an axis and we're wobbling and, we're traveling on the other side of the sun at some point during our a half year passing, that never happens. We never observe that in, natural space. We don't see that. And that was one of the biggest things for me because, geometry doesn't lie. Trigonometry doesn't lie.
Yeah.
There's pseudoscience and then there's actual empirical science. And I tend to lean towards the empirical side of it now.
Gotcha. That's so. And you also mentioned that you did a test, a time lapse test to sort of prove this thing out to yourself.
I did actually. I'm working on rendering it right now and getting it posted up trying to distribute it.
Got it. Can you describe the test in some detail, kind of like what you were telling me yesterday?
Yes. What I did was basically went up on my roof and I built this apparatus. Is basically out of metal and wood, and it was basically acting like a bore sight. And I took one sight hole that was very small and put another sight hole about 10 foot away from it.
Yeah.
And then fixed another stationary spot to be able to fix a camera. in there. And basically what I did over the span of 5.5 months, I aligned this apparatus to the Polaris star. And as I time-lapse videoed it,
Yeah.
the Polaris star never, ever once fell out of the sight hole whenever it was perfectly lined up to it. It never once did it.
5.5 months.
Five and a half months straight.
And you just finished the film for that?
I did.
All right, and you're rendering it, and man, if I can get a copy of that, I will be eternally grateful because I will put that thing up as soon as I can. And did I mean, from what you've seen in the video so far, it looks pretty good.
Oh yes. Like I did the different effects on it as far as like actually showing the contrails when all the other stars are rotating around it, but you don't see a contrail whenever the Polaris star is supposedly rotating because guess what? When you're
Yeah.
lined up to it, it doesn't move anywhere. There's no contrail.
Right on, right on. That's fantastic.
Is it the least bit blurry though? Like, is it at least moving in its own spot, or is it just?
It's a tad, like, in all fairness, it is a tiny bit blurry, but that could be anything to do with, like, humidity in the air or the exposure rate of the camera or whatever.
Right.
Got it. So when you were looking at the stuff, you mentioned to me that it started to put some stuff together because you said when you were on tour that on the seas that there were certain things that were going on that didn't make sense to you. And I kind of want to go through them one by one. The first thing was you were mentioning to me about ships that you tracked in the distance that you could never ever determine any curvature no matter what. Can you kind of break that down for us?
Basically, without losing people, I guess
Let's say we can go slow. It's okay.
for anyone that doesn't know, max observable distance, roughly, for the horizon out to sea is about 15 to 18 nautical miles, depending upon humidity and dew point and all of that.
Okay.
I've actually been outside with binoculars, with high-powered telescopic devices. We have access to certain things like that.
Mhm.
And as a ship is perceived to be dropping below the quote-unquote horizon, all you got to do is zoom in on it, and all of a sudden, poof, the bottom of the ship where it meets the water is back in observance again. And this doesn't add up because at 15 nautical miles, there's several feet to be dropped around a curved Earth.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't add up at all.
Wow. And you noticed that on a regular basis, and did it bother you? Because you were in a vantage point that most people don't have, and that was you were in the middle of well, just about every type of ocean, but calm oceans, and you were viewing ships, whatever, I imagine most of them were various allied ships that are around, and you could see the bow no matter where you were. I mean, this was a consistent thing you were witnessing all over the place.
Yep. And, the thing was, I never thought about it at the time. I can only tell you the account I have of what I did out there.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, it's something I just never thought about because, much like everybody today, it's not something you're just actively looking for. You go with the preconceived notion and, you move about your day. You don't even think about it.
Yeah. Did you think? I mean, did you have any concept of what it was? I mean, did you think it was refraction? Did you think it was just a humidity issue, an optical illusion? Did anything cross your mind, or did you just kind of say, that sort of stuff happens. I don't care. I'm going to go about doing my own thing.
It was kind of the latter that you just mentioned, but like looking back on it, hindsight being 2020, and everything I've learned about like refraction and mirages and all that stuff, and how mirages always are inverted. This wasn't a mirage. I could see the ship perfectly. It wasn't, it wasn't cutting any of the image out. It wasn't flipping it over. It definitely was the actual object. So,
wow, that's fantastic. Tell us a little bit about the Sea Sparrow surface missile system as far as how it tracks. So you're pointing, you're illuminating the target, correct? With that system.
Yes, and this is actually something that anyone can look up online. You can go to Wikipedia and look this up yourself.
We're not giving away classified information here. This is fully something.
They have whole pages about this. But basically, the way our system works is we're an 8 missile launcher, and we have other subsystems that basically allow us to produce RF or radio frequency. that we illuminate any target with, whether it be a threat or not. And that's how we track. It's by direct line of sight. And specifically, our fire control radar, we actually use a 2-degree pencil beam. It's very, very tight beam, so there's very little room for deviation on that. And it's a direct line of sight radar.
Okay.
And we're able to track targets up to 50 nautical miles away. And on a curved Earth, that just doesn't add up.
Because that should be impossible at 50 miles. And I'm looking at the chart, and I'll put this up on screen as we're putting this thing up on YouTube. But the chart, and this is very similar to the Chicago thing that's been going on. Have you kind of followed the Chicago skyline?
I have 60 miles away across Lake Michigan. Yep, they can see the whole city.
There you go. So this is collaborating that, which he's saying he can track targets at 50 miles away, which should be about 1,700 if you round up, 1,700 feet below the horizon. But you're hitting them just fine.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we're tracking them just fine, and it just doesn't add up. You can do simple trigonometry on it with elevation angle, and everything works out, and you don't drop the track. You can track it quite a bit of a distance out.
Got it. And this kind of dovetails into a guest we had. And I know you probably didn't listen to the show because I didn't expect you to listen to all of them before this one. When Jeffrey Grupp was going into details about the radar systems. And he said that's how he sort of got into it too, because there's pages and pages of radar distances and how they deal with stuff online.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Have you spoken, I guess, with your friends, or your fellow soldiers, like on the ship and whatnot, like about this, or have you kept this pretty much to yourself and to do the investigative research?
There's actually 2 people that I've talked to about it, and they're not as much on the out about it as I am, but they definitely are scratching their heads right now because they understand where I'm coming from on it. And like I said before, it's just something that you don't think about. We're told the parameters of how it works supposedly, and then we move on about our day. But there are just some things you can't, just put on the back burner anymore. It's like right in your face, like, hey, this is what's going on. This doesn't hash out.
The reason I asked too is because if enough murmuring goes on your ship, or if it goes to higher ups, are they going to get upset that you're even questioning, what you're being told or what you're being taught or what you're told to focus on and target, not to look at these parameters?
I've thought about that. They very well might, but they might just tell me like, hey, stay in your lane. But how I really look at it is, so many people are indoctrinated in the system. I think half of them would just look at me like, oh, he's not thinking about this right. He's crazy, whatever. Let's go on about our day. I don't think, I'm sure people well above them that might actually know what's going on, might actually know what's behind the curtain, might, throw a red flag for them. But as far as like everyday people, they're just believing the lie as well.
And Mark,
so
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say one more part to this questioning.
Sure.
Because people always say with any and I don't want to go into other conspiracies, but they always say, oh, well, if it was that big, there would be somebody who would talk and come forward. They couldn't keep everybody quiet like that. So, like you just mentioned, the higher ups might know, but do you think that's the case here? Do you think there's a secret at a certain level that they don't want you to know about?
Maybe.
Is that me or Mark?
I guess you specifically because you're in. I mean, you know what I'm saying, Mark, right? I mean, people.
Yeah. But it could be. Well, let me ask Robert this.
Okay.
Maybe let me put it a different way. If you kept going down the way you were going, because you're in guidance, you're in missile guidance, you're in fire solutions and fire control. When you get up past where you are now, is it pretty much at that point it turns into more of an administrative role and then becomes a kind of a cushy desk job?
Yeah. Do they just promote you?
Yeah, they just promote you, and then people don't care at that point. It's like, okay, I'm going career, therefore, I don't have to think about this stuff anymore. In which case, the secret isn't really lost. It just never goes past this because nobody figures it out. Nobody makes the leap like you're making.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned it that way because that's pretty much what I was trying to say.
Okay.
Like people just have this mindset of they just honestly, it just seems like they don't care.
Yeah.
Like even if you could bring evidence to them, it just seems like they kind of have this disposition to be like, well, you might be right on that, but I don't really care that much, or you're just crazy, you're misunderstanding what you're saying.
Yeah.
We all know it's this. And I think a lot of it just gets honestly batted away.
Yeah.
And, that one person that's mentioning it, it's like beating your head against the wall because no one else, whether they care or not, just doesn't have I guess the getter, the go and get it attitude as far
Yeah.
as trying to figure out this information.
Yeah.
Can I answer something to that, Mark?
Yeah.
When I worked at Verizon, it was First Bell Atlantic. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of us that were specially trained in a specific task, fiber optics, whatever, and you had access to equipment that only people in telecom would have access to at a certain level. But you're right. A lot of people never cared, or like me, I was investigative. I was always a bit of a tinkerer, and I would take things apart as a kid and hack and you name it. So I would try to explore things, and they say, well, you don't need to do that. My managers would actually say, no, don't go look in there and don't do that. But other people weren't even interested in investigating it. Whether it was like wiretapping, all these extra features and functions that we can do on a daily, look, at one time there was a scandal. I shouldn't probably say this, but, looking at text messages, databases of, things that you shouldn't look at. And I know, you have protocols in the military. You don't want to ruin your career per se. You don't want to be be mischievous. But like you said, when you get to a certain level of technical expertise, because you guys are experts at what you do. I mean, you've been doing this for, you said 10 years?
10 years, yep.
Yeah, so to pose the question to fellow, guys with you on the ship, it's not that absurd or that far-fetched to pose the question.
No, it's not. But it's kind of like pilots talking to each other. Remember, because the arguments always come up, why don't more pilots know that the maps are wrong, that the GPS system is wrong? And it's because there's two reasons. One, because you got to make that massive leap of faith. And two, if you do make the personal leap of faith, who do you tell it to? Because a lot of the guys, like especially in the military, they're just doing their time. They're just there. They're just going to put in their years and get out. And so you probably bring it to them, and they just don't get the magnitude of it because you'd probably bring it up to them. They'd be like, "Yeah, I got better fish to fry." They just don't understand. No different than the people that I still get emails from and say, "Well, what does it matter if the Earth is flat?" It's like, what are you kidding? Why would you say something like that? It's the biggest story of all time. Why would you just dismiss it? It's like, well, I don't care. I still got to go to work. It's like, yeah, but your work and your world would change literally. So, so yeah, it's and do we know how many minutes until break at this point? It could be coming like at any second, right? If we're 5 minutes off.
We're off. Yeah, the whole thing was off tonight. Mercury retrograde.
Yeah. Mercury retrograde. So if you hear music, I'll just cut straight to break because hopefully we will hear music. But there's so many questions I have for you, and hopefully you can answer them. So let's talk about real quick before we go to break about the system itself, because you said the system that you're working on was actually based on an older system that wasn't even United States. It was built on a European system, right?
It was actually, yep.
Go ahead.
Do you want me to get into it now before the break?
Yeah, and then we'll just come back. We'll just roll as long as we can.
Okay. So basically, I can't talk about specific stuff, obviously, but
of course,
NATO Sea Sparrow, its involvement on who created it is in the name itself, the NATO community. All right. There was 13 countries specifically that were involved in helping create this weapon system. It was originally created as a point defense weapons missile system, and it was used, during coming out of World War II. Because we had a lot of threats with low-flying aircraft, just launching at us and getting out of there. And we had no way to really combat it. So one of the things that you mentioned is the fact that we had some European countries help us. Specifically, one of the things that is a part of our system is our computer, and how we actually, solve the fire control problem, how we, go in and actually put a missile on a target. And that computer was basically retrofitted from a Norwegian tank. And it was built specifically for that tank, and it was just repurposed later on for obviously this system. But if you look at it, any tank is actually built upon a planar model. It's built on an X and a Y coordinate system for like artillery shots.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, I mean, when that gets repurposed to a missile system, and we have much further range than obviously a tank does on being able to effectively put a missile on a target,
Yeah.
you would think that we would have to account for the curvature of the world, because it's got to be able to maintain a proper course to get to the target.
Okay.
And that's just not something you observe.
Wow.
It almost sounds like they had leftover parts like that Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, that fiasco, the Pentagon Wars.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, this is really interesting to me. I'm kind of a fan of military technology anyway. So a Norwegian tank, they use the software, the algorithms, the firing algorithms, and the Norwegian tank everything was based off a plane, not shooting on a curved surface, but a plane. And then they retrofitted it for the United States Navy missile system. And that system didn't change anything. All they did was they extended the range on it so that you could fire missiles, much longer than an artillery shell. But the point was, it's still firing with a plane, dealing with a flat model for the software. Correct?
Yes, up until a point. And what I mean by that, let me elaborate on that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. We got to go to break. Hey, but we will be back with more Robert, more Navy stuff.
Angry Beaver Radio with John Bernard. Saturday on Truth Frequency Radio.
Strange World. I'm your host, Mark Sargent. With me is personal friend and wingman Jonathan from Jersey, and on with us is special guest and brand new, his first interview ever. I hope it's not his last, but we'll see. Is Robert from the United States Navy. He is the NATO Sea Sparrow Surface Missile System Instructor, Master Training Specialist, and he's basically coming out and saying, you know what? Everything I see, the world doesn't look like a globe, that's for sure. In fact, he couldn't prove it if he wanted to. So where we left off with you, Robert, was that the Norwegian system, the Norwegian tank system that was retrofitted for the United States Navy Sparrow missile system, which I find fascinating in itself. It's like, what, you're not going to spend the money and write a whole new thing of software? Is nothing really changed when you moved from the tank? Not much changed. But moving from the tank model to the ship model, all they did was extend the range, because the Sparrow system has longer ranges than any tank, right?
Yes.
Okay. And it does not account for what I think you mentioned earlier. It does not, and please feel free to expand on this. It does not take into account the Coriolis effect, otherwise known as the Earth spinning. Is that also true?
That is correct.
Can you give us anything on that?
Yeah. Basically, the main thing whenever they repurposed that Norwegian tank's computer, the only major thing they really changed, none of the hardware changed for it. The only thing they changed around is the software, and that was just to integrate for a missile system being used instead, because obviously we got more ammunition readily available, like we have 8 missiles instead of 1 barrel.
Yeah.
We have different peripheral pieces of equipment other than just onboard equipment with a tank. So the software was changed to run through the same hardware. And I know some people know what I'm talking about with that. But yeah, basically, when you can't change hardware, your software is limited, and that's
Yeah.
with any computer, you know.
Yeah.
And so the only thing they could really implement with that, like you said, is a further range because of the missile itself.
Yeah.
Wait,
But
wait,
yeah.
wait, can I ask a
Oh, go
question
ahead.
real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
The targeting system on the Norwegian tank, that was for like a tow missile system or a Hellfire, or what kind of, for a missile, right? Not a projectile, not like a
For
shell.
the Norwegian tank.
Yeah, was it for a shell or for a missile system that was mounted on
It
the
was
tank?
for a shell.
Okay, no, because I think that's important because a missile has a rocket on the end of it, right?
Yeah.
So it's a different thrust vector and all that. I guess I don't know if that's the right term, but a shell you're accounting for it dropping, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
and you account for missiles dropping too, but basically you have a solid propellant in a missile that burns out to a max distance, you know. But once it's in the air, it has onboard guidance to adjust its wings to basically inertial nav to the target.
Yeah.
And yeah, basically the Norwegian tank, that computer that was repurposed, its whole purpose was just to fire shells, you know, a standard gunpowder shell, sabot, and that was it. And basically that was, we all know and can look back to artillery and cross-reference this. Artillery is always done from a plane or module. It's never taken into effect with Coriolis effect and, you know, curvature of the world. Even
Yeah.
though you hear those buzzwords all the time, you can look back on many articles from professionals that's done 20 years in the Army and worked with howitzers and all that stuff. They've never once taken the Coriolis effect into consideration.
And that's a good point to bring up. I'm not cutting you off. I just have to add this in though, because I did get a letter from, he's obviously not there doing an interview. I wish more military people would come out and talk about this, but I got a letter from a howitzer, guy out that was stationed in Fallujah. And he said, and I think I remember reading it for Jonathan, and I think I talked about it on air a little bit, where he said that, yeah, the fire control, yeah, the computer takes over, of course, but there's someone always doing a manual calculation right next to it. And
Yes.
he was part of that team, and he said, look, that guy that's doing the manual stuff, he never took into account that the Earth was spinning, ever. And he goes, I don't know where, in fact, it's almost like it's just been passed down from generation to generation, kind of like one of those whispers. It's like, oh yeah, they talk about it like, oh yeah, we have to deal with Coriolis effect, but nobody actually does it. It's just one of those things that, in case anybody asks, it's like, oh yeah, we account for that. But what you're saying is basically confirming what he's saying. He's in the Army, you're in the Navy firing missiles, he's firing artillery shells, and you're saying curvature, or I'm sorry, the spinning of the Earth doesn't factor in at all to the calculations.
No, it doesn't. And like I said, just to kind of put that whole nail in the coffin on the Coriolis effect,
Mm-hmm.
in my, from what I've seen, what I've observed, I think it's almost like it's a buzzword, like it's just a cool thing to mention, like, oh yeah, we take shots so accurate from so far away, and we even have to account for the curvature of the Earth and, the spinning of the Earth just to, prop it up like it was such a impressive, feat to obtain. And
Yeah.
I think that people just kind of went along with it. And like you said, since so many people, the whole parroting community that we have today, they're just like, Brock, Coriolis effect, and
So
that's
yeah,
really what it is.
Yeah, it's a good news story, but you're basically saying, look, I fire this stuff. It isn't there. It does not happen, and you're not firing. It's not, people would. I'm not kidding. When I first heard about the sniper stuff, that the snipers have to account for Coriolis effect, I'm going, what are you talking about? I shoot. I've never heard nor read an article nor seen any calculation, and I've read a lot of firearm periodicals in my day. And so when the artillery guy came out, it was like, oh yeah. And then when your stuff, we're not gonna say exactly the range of the Sparrow, but the Sparrow fires way longer in artillery show. Look, if it doesn't account for the Coriolis effect with the Sparrow, you're never going to see it after that.
But wait, we're talking about line of sight targeting or GPS for the projectile, for the missile.
For the missile, it's line of sight targeting. That's basically, like I said earlier, we track the target with a illuminator, and it's basically just another piece of gear that's tied into ours. And once we lock up on the target, we're line of sight pointing straight at it because it's a 2-degree pencil beam. It has to be pointing straight at it, because if it's not going to see it. It's not a search radar. It's a fire control radar. And, if you're supposedly looking at something, 50 nautical miles away around a huge curve, it's just, you can't punch through the ocean with RF.
Well, Mark, can I ask one more question?
Yeah. Go.
The reason I ask is because I'm thinking about the Navy railgun that was fitted on the, I think, DDG 1000s, and
Yes.
I don't know, would they be able to use the same system, or do you know if they have something similar? Because it seems like if the world is flat, what the hell do you need GPS and accounting for a curve? And that thing's supposed to fire at like 5,000 or 6,000 miles an hour. I think like Mach 7 with those projectiles.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. And basically, the way I look at it is this: I won't claim to be an expert on that new system. It's kind of being prototyped right now.
Okay.
The railgun.
But yeah, the railgun.
Yeah.
And basically, though, it follows along the same principles as a 5-inch gun that's already in effect for the Navy right now. We use a 5-inch cannon, and we can do defilade shots and enfilade shots where we can fire over mountains and make it fall back down and stuff like that. It's the same principle. All you're applying is a faster speed, and faster speed equates to a greater distance. Instead of having to be 20 nautical miles away from a target, you can be like 50 or 70 nautical miles away. And that's really what it plays into. And, I've even seen articles on that myself where it talked about it being more of a, less of a littoral ship, like having to be right off the coast, and could be used readily available for other assets because it has such a great range with that. And I think it's more playing into that. It's not necessarily anything to do with curvature or Coriolis effect.
Wow.
That's amazing. So real quick, because I want to review, because again, I know we're going to be kind of beaten on this, but this is important information, and repetition here is the only way we're going to get through to some people. So when you're using the Sea Sparrow system, the missile system, the missile is not guiding itself. You are guiding it from the ship with a 2-inch beam, right?
We actually are using a 2-inch beam. And basically how it works is we have a frequency that we hit the target with, and then the target reflects that frequency. It reflects the RF. And when our missile's in the air, our missile sees that reflected energy, and then it hones in on it and makes its own onboard adjustments.
Got it.
Based upon the reflected energy.
Is it two slightly different frequencies so that it has a collision point?
I can't confirm.
Never mind. I'm sorry. I don't know anything.
You're good.
I don't know what the hell I'm talking about sometimes. I'm sorry.
You're good.
I'm such an idiot.
I'll just tell you this. I can answer that partly. We have to use the same frequency. But once our missile does get to a certain point, it has point detonation, and this is all stuff you can look up. It has point detonation, and it has a proximity fuse. And the way a proximity fuse works is it actually has a small low-band transmitter on the missile. So once it gets within its terminal range of the target, it will make an illumination itself and determine where the target's at more precisely. And then it will explode if it's close enough.
Got it.
Nice, Jonathan. You out-geeked me on that one.
Oh, well, we can talk later. Off
yeah,
air.
we'll have to probably talk off air about that. That's good. But the point is that the 2-inch beam, you have to have it on there for most of the trip. That thing's
Not
out
most,
there.
all of it, pretty much.
Okay, all the trip, except for the last couple seconds, if that. You can pull it off if you had to.
If you absolutely had to, but you have to understand, if it's not close enough, if you pull it off, the missile will go ballistic on its last update, and it might not hit the target.
Got it. And so if what you're basically saying is this 2-inch beam, what you're painting the target with, is you guys, when you're firing this thing out there, you do not account for curvature. That beam shouldn't be able to reach a target at a certain, at whatever the, at 50 miles, should not be able to hit that target.
Yeah, and this is a perfect thing, and I'm really glad that I was fortunate enough to work on this, because the argument always is, well, we can reach over a curve because we're a search radar and we use atmospherics and bounce off different parts of the atmosphere, and then
Okay.
it comes back down.
Okay.
Now, see, the problem with that is this can't happen with a 2-degree pencil beam. The angle of this cannot put RF up into an atmosphere and then bounce it back down and then expect to get it back so
It's
we
too
can properly track.
it's too
It's too
precise.
precise.
Yeah.
It's too precise. It can't
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. Wow. It's
Wait a minute, I thought that's why they trained us all on Pong and games like that back in the 70s.
because you can bounce stuff
Off
off
the
the off the ceiling. And normally I would, yeah, if you, and please feel free to chime in on this, Robert. But if it was a wide angle beam, yeah, you might be able to do it. But as far as you know, they're not using that sort of technology to bounce something off the atmosphere and then track it from there. Otherwise, you'd
Well,
probably be using it, because this stuff is, the Sparrow system's currently in use by a whole bunch, by all of NATO, right?
yeah, quite a few different countries. And one thing, there are other radar systems that we use that are actually, and let me just explain this before I go on. There are search radars, and then there are tracking radars. And a search radar has a much wider band of just
Right.
kind of blanketing the sky with RF so it can find something,
Mm-hmm.
as where a tracking radar is way more precise. And basically, there's a communication between the search radar and then the tracking radar. Once the search radar finds that bearing and elevation of a target, it hands it over to the tracking radar through the computers, and then the tracking radar slews immediately out to where the search radar told it to go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, and that's basically how it works in layman. But
Well, I think
yeah,
that's
there's
why
a wide band,
I think
but
that's why
it doesn't account for it.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Oh, you're good.
No, I mean,
You're good.
cell phone works, I think, pretty much the same way. I mean, they have their basic telemetry from tower to tower. They have to align it, but they usually use a relatively larger bandwidth, I guess. So you have more access points, hot points, or you'll pick up on a tower, and then once it finds your phone, it connects, and it's more narrow. Is that correct?
Yes,
Well,
that's basically how it works.
Yeah.
Nice.
Because you can go a greater distance over a narrow band. If real quick for the audience, if you remember the old 900 megahertz phones, you used to be able to drive through neighborhoods, an old Panasonic phone, and pick up your neighbor's base station 1,500 feet away. Now at 2.4 gigahertz, you get more data on that wider bandwidth, like you said, flooding the sky with data or RF, but it's not as long a distance until you're closer to that base. But anyway, I'm
Exactly.
sorry.
No, it's okay.
Oh, yeah, you're good. Last little topic that I
Sure.
wanted to mention about that
Mhm.
specifically is some of our search radars boast distances of being able to track stuff like over 200 miles away. So take that into consideration for supposed curvature. This is something to think about.
200 miles. Yeah, I haven't even looked at the thing at 200 miles, but that's a massive distance. That's I think that's a full-blown mile below the horizon if the world was actually round.
Mhm.
If I'm not mistaken, which, yeah, you shouldn't be able to hit it. Should not, unless, again, what you're talking about, bouncing it off something, which what you're saying it does not do. Let me ask something else, because you and I hadn't really, and again, if you can't talk about that, that's fine. But yeah, you specialize in the Sea Sparrow surface missile system, but you probably have had exposure to all sorts of different weapon systems from the ship point of view, both short range and maybe even a few that are longer range. Do you guys compare notes? I mean, do you kind of see the same sort of thing where everything's consistent? It's not like all the one system is using curvature and the other system isn't. Nobody's using curvature on anything, as far as you know.
As far as I know, we do not. I'm glad you mentioned that, because other systems, if you want to compare them, the only thing we feed into our systems at all, and it's only on a plane system. We have this piece of equipment, and I'm sure quite a few people are familiar with this, but we use gyros, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And these gyros are powered on our ship, and basically they stay stationary once they're spooled up, and we have to power them up before we get underway.
Yeah.
And this information from this gyro is fed into all of our radar systems and all of our weapon systems, and all they account for is the pitch and roll of our ship. So
Yeah.
we can account and send that information to, compensate. Like if our ship takes a huge roll,
Yeah.
it compensates our weapon system to aim higher,
Hmm.
if need be. And if you look at the coordinate system for that, there's no curvature in that at
Yeah.
all. It's just a plain model.
That's great.
Wow.
So yeah, so basically what he's saying there, folks, in case you've missed anything yet, is that there are no weapon systems currently in the U.S. Navy that are using curvature, or the Coriolis effect. It's something we've suspected for a little while now, and but nobody's actually said it. And I'm sorry, Robert, did you want to say something or no?
No,
Oh, no, I'm good.
I got another question. If
Oh,
I
what do you
may.
got? What do you got?
I was going to ask you because you were talking about earlier about the optics that you have from binoculars to, I guess, specialized equipment that only the military has. I was wondering, can you see at a greater distance at night than daytime? And the reason I ask you this is because basically our human eye only sees what's reflected or refracted off of objects, right? So with the water and, like you said, the haze and how far light can travel, probably can't see that far. It would fade. Just like almost like a 1 point perspective down a railroad track. It eventually becomes a point where you can't see, even if the track is still going straight. Yeah, can you basically see further at night, whether it's other ships or other objects?
I'll put it to you this way. On my tour on board that ship, I stood a few different watches. I can't go into detail with what they were, but we electronically could see, different ships that were like 20, 25, 30 nautical miles away. And I've been outside and I've seen with infrared cameras, where there's no haze, none of that stuff. I've literally seen ships like 25, 27 nautical miles away.
Wow.
Wow. And infrared, yeah, that's not something that's not mirage material there.
Well, you have night
Yeah.
vision goggles, right, Mark?
I've got night vision goggles, but I'm sure theirs are by
Yeah.
far.
No, but I'm saying you look at the sky and you're looking at things that are how far out in the sky? I mean, that's a direct line of sight.
Oh yeah, you're right. Very, very far.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can see way further with infrared.
Right.
But in his case, yeah, that's actually an interesting point because infrared, people will talk about mirages and they say, oh, Chicago's a mirage and all this. It's like, well, if it was a mirage, it wouldn't show up on infrared. That's a great test. Somebody should.
Infrared doesn't lie.
Yeah,
The
infrared doesn't
object
lie.
is there.
But,
If-
I
Go
gotta
ahead.
just say one thing because I'm a photographer. The reason I'm asking you this question, see, now we all think from different perspectives. Mark's going to think one way, you're going to think one way because of your military training. I'm going to think a different way from my photography background. The audience doesn't necessarily think this way.
Yeah.
If you've ever, now any layperson's done this, where you go to take a picture of a pond and there's koi fish in it or something.
Yeah.
You notice what happens when you don't have a polarized set of glasses on? You can't see. There's a haze off that.
Yeah.
And that's only 5 feet away.
Yeah.
So on a daily basis, when we're looking at the distance, whether it's a heat wave mirage coming off the road, whether it's you see what I'm saying? Like light is really a distraction. If it's
Yeah.
too bright of a light, your eyes, your pupils, pinpoint so you can't see. You see what I'm saying? There's too many factors, and here he has technology on a flat plane, the most flat plane on Earth, because there's no land that's this flat, right? It's
Yeah.
only the oceans that are this.
It's only the oceans that are this flat, with the exception of that salt flat down in South America. But that's a whole other thing.
Sure.
Yeah, but yeah, I know. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm kind of focused on this, but that's a great new test. I didn't even occur to me. I got to thank Jonathan for that one, and you, Robert, because the Chicago skyline, you can say it's a mirage all you want, but if you can see it with infrared binoculars, then what is it?
Somebody just got in their car. I can hear the car door slamming.
Seriously,
They got a cup of coffee. It's spilling on them, and they're like, "I'm getting there first."
seriously, get some freaking night vision binoculars and see if you can see Chicago. Unfortunately, here's the bad part about it, and I'm going to digress for a minute or two, and that is when I was shopping around for night vision binoculars. And most of them are made in Russia for some reason. I have no idea why they corner the market on those. Most of them do not have output, so you can't output it to video. So before anyone rushes out to buy one, know that you can't. I mean, you might be able to take a snapshot. That's the good news, and hook it up to camera. But you're not going to be able to just grab the first pair off of Amazon and export to video because most of them don't have video output, and I don't know why of any kind. So there's no stick you can take out of it and put into something else in binoculars. I'm going, why would you?
Point.
Yeah.
Can I say something real quick?
Why
This might help them out.
you're the guest, man. You can say whatever you want.
You can step over us
This
anytime.
Yeah.
this might help them out. He is right. Most of them do not have an output, but there are rigs you can buy to basically fit an external camera on the sight hole of those night visions, and you can film that way.
There you go.
Nice. Nice. That's good. Yeah, and I've seen some people. There was a guy down in Colorado Springs that did it when he was shooting stuff at the sky, and he came up with some really great photography. But it didn't even occur to me what you were saying. That's brand new, and that is that you could see the ships at what 20? Would you say 26, 27 nautical miles?
Yeah, I know that it was that ship because I basically correlated it to, the relative bearing of where our ship was going.
Yeah.
And I looked out in that distance, I went outside and I could see it. And I was amazed. Not like in the essence of, oh, all of a sudden I thought we were on a flat world, because I didn't think that way at the time.
Yeah.
But I was amazed in the fact that we were always pounded in the head with, oh yeah, the horizon's only 15 to 18 nautical miles, over and over and over again. And that's what we were always force fed.
So it was
It's in our training,
yeah. So it was this nagging thing in the back of your head going, wait, I can only see 15 to 18 nautical miles, but I'm seeing a ship at 27.
Yeah.
Yeah. Almost double. And I can see it. And I'm seeing it with infrared, which means it's actually there. It's not, mirages don't give off big heat signatures or yeah. Wow.
Can I ask one other question?
Yeah.
We always now, if a ship at 27 nautical miles were to shoot a flare in the air, or I guess if they were 30 miles, would it make a difference if there was some elevation at play off the horizon?
As far as what, I don't understand.
I don't think
line of sight, just being able to see at that distance. Does it increase? I'm not trying to.
I think the limit of his. I think the reason he could probably have seen further if the night vision he was using had even better magnification.
Right.
And night vision magnification, unfortunately, that's fairly limited too. In fact, if you went online on Amazon, I think the most you can get is like 10x, which is ridiculously low for what I think you should be able to get, and it costs like $3,000.
No, where my line of thinking is going is when you look at the an object in space, that whether you want to call it a satellite, whatever, at a certain height, and it's being reflected by the sun or whatever's reflecting it, making it so bright, right? That's well over 15, maybe even 30, 40, 50 miles up in the sky, right?
Yeah.
So if there's a light source that bright at sea level, this is what I'm saying. Now you don't have to use your optics. I'm just saying, is that light piercing or strong enough that it covers that distance? Does that make sense?
Oh, I bet it would.
Rather than the other way around.
So
there's actually a study on that. There's a study on light sources and how far you can see them away. Like it's supposedly said that you can see a single candlelight from several football fields away. Like your eye is that, particular about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd heard that too. I think it was one of those stories where they were talking about the human senses, and that human eyes are actually more sensitive than most people think. But we always compare them to different types of animal eyes, and in which case we fall short on some. Our eyes are pretty good all around.
Yeah, and don't forget, I mean, we see it in a certain limited frequency range. That's why the infrared helps. The reason I was using a flare as an example is because an arc, when something arcs or burns like that, like a fuse, it's a different wavelength that's even higher or more intense, like a discharge.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, hey, we're going to break. So when we come back, more Navy goodness. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
No hate, no hype, no fear.
Welcome back to Strange World. I'm your host, Mark Sargent. With me, really good friend, really good guy, and wingman Jonathan from Jersey.
Hey, what's up,
And
man? Are we at the beginning of the show again?
you'd think so from the music we just played, but no, we're at the top of this third segment.
Oh, right on.
Not the beginning of the show. You had to dig on him, didn't you?
Oh, his new name is Mercury Retrograde.
Nice. I'm going to use that too.
That's his new nickname.
I'm going to start calling him Mercury or Flash because Flash has those little wings on
There
the
you
side
go.
of his head. Anyway, with us is a very special guest and a guy who I think is going to change a lot of stuff here. He is United States Navy, Robert. He is a NATO Sea Sparrow Surface Missile System Instructor. That is a mouthful, or otherwise known as NSSMS for short, and a Master Training Specialist. And he's basically coming out and saying that, look, he has access to all sorts of fun toys and tools out on the high seas. And everything that he's seen, from the curvature of the Earth to the Coriolis effect and even the navigation, which we haven't even touched on yet, is basically showing that it's not a globe. And at the very least, it's there's no curve and it's not spinning. And if the navigation's wrong, well, it all kind of points to the same thing, doesn't it, folks? Which is it looks like it's flat. And if you're just listening to this broadcast and it's the first time you ever listen to this, you're probably thinking these guys are nuts. I assure you, we are not. And Robert is going to be, I guarantee, the first of several military people that are going to come out.
Excuse me. I am nuts, and this has nothing to do with the flat Earth. But go ahead.
That is true. I'm not going to deny that. You're spooky sometimes. Seriously, sometimes I look at you and I immediately think it puts the lotion on its skin.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
All right, let's get back on topic.
Okay. Anyway, sorry. I'm not trying to digress, Robert, because I really want to get in more of your stuff here. So where we left off was that not only is all that fun stuff happening, but you also mentioned that while you were on watch several times, that using infrared, was it binoculars or telescopes, or you don't have to describe them necessarily, but they were infrared devices that could see a long way out over the water.
Yes.
At night. And you could see ships at 27 nautical miles. And I forgot, forgive my ignorance on this because I wasn't going to look it up. Is nautical mile the same as a land-based mile?
No,
it's not
actually, it's farther.
So it's kind of like knots versus miles, or knots versus feet. So anyway, how long is it?
It's roughly 6,070.12 feet.
Oh wow!
So it's quite a bit distance longer than a mile. So you could actually say it was well over 30 miles that I saw this ship.
Okay, so if anybody's listening to this and hasn't been impressed when he says 15 nautical miles, 27 nautical miles, yeah, if you take 27 nautical miles and convert it to land-based miles, which you drive with your car, it's quite a bit longer. So yeah, that's amazing. That's unbelievable. So let's get into, because I don't want to miss anything. Let's get into something else you mentioned, and then we'll get into, if we have time at the very last segment, we'll still have time, and then to get in, because you wanted to talk about also different experiments that you came up with that flat earthers could use. True?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes. And, some of them probably might have been done already, but I just wanted to see if any of them seemed valid.
Well, you came to the right place, because if anyone's going to know, we are. Because I scour the internet as much as I can, and what I miss, other people send to me, and they say, "Have you seen this? This is the greatest thing ever." And it's like, no, I've got the greatest thing ever, and it's this guy right here. The navigation systems currently being used right now. You said that, so you guys are using basic GPS designed by the DoD when you're out there, right?
Yes.
But you said when courses are being plotted, if you're using basic trig, the GPS system is not matching up with manual calculations. Can you expand on that at all?
I can. Basically, how we navigate, we base it upon, like I said earlier, our gyro. Mm-hmm. Our gyro feeds into a lot of how our navigation actually works. GPS is actually a backup. We do not actually use it as our primary on board ships, which should say something to a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. Since you think that would be the Bible, it's like, wait, it's a satellite-based system. It's error-proof.
Hmm.
And even if, and you probably watched the clues, even if the planes are being dropped from the GPS system, the military should have full access to everything. There should be full coverage. It's a global positioning system. But you're saying you guys do it. It's not even your primary.
It isn't. Like I said, we use our gyro that we spool up. That's, anyone that knows about a gyro knows that it's on a planar module. That's the only way they work.
Yeah.
And basically, it's used as our dead reckoning direction of how we plot and how we travel and what instruments we actually have on our bridge to be able to tell what direction we're going. And we use GPS kind of as a backup if that system ever goes down, like if we lose our gyros.
Wow. And were you instrumental? I mean, were you kind of on the pulse of both those systems?
Gyros, I just know about them on the limitation of what they input to my system.
Okay.
I'm not a gyro technician in all
All right.
fairness,
That's
but
fine.
we are all trained and know how they work, and we know what model they work off of, and it's only an X and a Y model at any
Okay.
given point.
Got
So,
it. And
yep.
and yeah, and the X and the Y model, for those of you who haven't figured, remembered anything, that just means it's flat. You're not using anything else. True?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So tell us more about some little, you were mentioning kind of some inconsistencies with practical math versus how the ship actually gets from point A to point B.
Yes. One of the things that always struck a chord with me looking back on it is how long it actually took us to get to different parts of the world. Meaning specifically, if the Earth was a globe, we should be able to take, a spherical trajectory to a destination, and that's anyone that knows anything about, math will know that the hypotenuse is always the shorter distance.
Mm-hmm.
And that spherical attribute to it, we should get to a said destination based upon how fast we're going, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And that should play into it, and that should be all that you have to take into consideration. But, whenever you look at it, these distances sometimes take much shorter of a time, or sometimes they take a lot longer, depending upon where we're going in the world. And there's nothing to account for that, because I can tell you that, we know how fast our ship goes. And when we're at a steady cruise speed and nothing's changing it and we're not stopping for any reason,
Mm-hmm.
other than to do boxes out at sea, we do a whole lot of boxes. And sometimes looking back on that, I always wondered why we did that. And a lot of it has to do with, I think, trying to mask how long it actually takes us to get to certain places.
Explain real quick. Sorry, I have to back up. The boxes. Explain that
Okay.
for the layman that's never heard that.
Basically, and this is something people can look up to.
Mm-hmm.
We basically, depending upon where our area of responsibility is, wherever in the world, we'll just kind of sit in an area and just do boxes out in the sea. Like, we'll just do circles, over and over and over again.
Wow.
Okay. But you're saying that sometimes you suspect that sometimes when you guys are just going in circles, it's because you want to kind of mask the fact that the destination is going to be off.
Yes, I honestly, looking back on that, that's what I surmise. And, I'm not trying to get into the speculation side of it. I'm trying
Sure.
to bring forth truths.
Sure.
And that is my speculation, I'll be fair. But it makes perfect sense when you actually think about it, because when you look at it and compare it to other evidence like southern hemispherical travel by airplane, stuff like that, like you said, how they just fall off the face of the world pretty much.
Yeah.
Pun intended.
Yeah.
But it adds up. If you look at it and you compare facts with facts, it makes perfect sense. And there's not a whole lot of room to account for that, because when we're cruising and we got a mission to do, we're cruising. We're not lollygagging around. We're staying full speed.
Yeah.
And based upon the distance, and I've mapped it out before, from the East Coast of the United States over to the Mediterranean, and it should have took a certain amount of time, and it ended up taking, less time than that. And I'm like, how is that possible? Because we don't go faster than that.
And when you say less time, you mean by days or
by
hour
days.
by
By
days?
days.
What?
So you're supposed to be there on Friday and you show up on a Tuesday type of thing?
Well, not that crazy, but like,
bad.
but bad. It's quite a bit off. And, I've been on deployments before where, we have a max speed and we can't break that speed by limitation. And we've gotten there earlier. And I'm like, so I've made this trip before going across the pond, the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
And it took us like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
As where I've went across it before and it took us like, a week and like 5 days.
Whoa. Wait a minute.
What?
Wait a minute. Because now we're getting into something that's bordering on Jonathan's area of expertise, which is you're saying that okay. So the first time when we'll just throw out examples because I know you're not going to give out. We don't even know what ship we're talking about, so it doesn't really matter. But if you're crossing the Atlantic and you're doing, let's say, max speed because you're on mission, you do it in 2 weeks. But all of a sudden, the next time you do it 2 days ahead of schedule, even though physically you shouldn't be able to exceed that speed.
Yes.
Wow. I don't even
And
know
I have
that.
had that happen before, and I never thought about it, in this light because I got off that ship back in 2012.
Yeah.
But looking back on it, we've had plenty of times that's happened. Especially, I've been down to South America. I've been across the equator, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And circumnavigation, when we go down that far, seems to take a lot longer of a time for us to travel to point A to point B, and it doesn't add up.
No, wait. Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
When those experiences happened to you, were you assigned to the USS Eldridge by any chance?
No.
Nice. Do you even know what the USS Eldridge was?
Refresh my memory.
That was the Philadelphia experiment where they were kind of messing around with the unified field theory and made the ship. They were trying to make the ship go radar invisible, and supposedly it actually shifted into another dimension temporarily, and all the crew members went insane. You gotta look that up sometime.
Insane. I meant that they were trying to do time travel. God, you don't have to insult the guy.
No, I wasn't insult. This is why I don't like you very much sometimes. Watch it sometime. It's a great '80s movie called The Philadelphia Experiment. But I'm sorry, back on track here because this is really cool stuff. So you do the trip. I mean, let's get the obvious question out of the way. Doesn't it kind of freak people out that are on the bridge when they all of a sudden the radar shows up a landmass? It's like, oh yeah, we're here. People start looking at their watches, going, that's a little odd. When you show up 2 days early.
No one even thinks about it. Honestly, the mentality that they have is, oh, cool, we're about to pull into a port earlier. Like there's so many masks, there's so many carrots put in front of people's faces. I just don't think think about it. It's not a negative thing.
No.
People don't think about the positive stuff like, oh, we got here earlier. Cool.
Oh, there's extra money in my pay grade this year. They overpaid me this month.
But
they only scrutinize the bad things,
But you'd think that I know I should be practicing what I preach here because even if a navigation nerd, who wasn't going to go do shore leave and down a fifth of rum, if he wasn't going to do that, he's looked and he's going, I wonder how my math was off. And he can't figure it out, so it's like he just threw it in the back of his head and he didn't think about it again. But if you do it over and over, I
you know what you just reminded me of? I just have to put this out there. I'm sorry.
Who, him or me?
Robert.
Okay.
Apropos to nothing. I know a guy who back in the 50s, a friend of the family's bought a car, and supposedly it had a special GM carburetor on it. It was a test carburetor.
Yeah.
Well, the freaking thing was getting like 100 and something miles to the gallon, and the gas gauge never went down. So the guy was so perturbed by this, he actually brought it back to the dealer and said, I think there's something wrong with this car. I haven't had to put any gas into it. They said, no problem. We'll look at it. So they took it and they put the regular carburetor in, and he was all happy after. He says, oh, there it goes. It's working now.
Yeah,
And that just proves people don't care about positivity. They care about societal norms.
yeah.
It's a psychological thing.
Now you're absolutely right. Had you pulled, let's put it this way, had you pulled into port 2 or 3 days after the fact,
Right.
that it's like, oh, we should be there on Tuesday and we show up on Friday. Then I think, yeah, people would be like, going, what happened? Is there something wrong with the engines? They'd be checking every piece of equipment in that thing.
Right.
But that's amazing. Yeah, I don't even know what to make of that yet. There's especially with ships, there's a real limitation on speed. It doesn't matter what you put into the engines. You could hook up nitros all you want. It's not going to help you.
What about Mark? What about what we always talk about with observing things like quantum waves and particles, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you're out at sea where it's dark, maybe because you can't observe any solid points of reference,
Yeah.
time slips as well.
Wow.
Over water. I don't know.
Wow.
I mean, we know what happens in space, according to what they've said about astronauts floating just, in the lower Earth orbit, that supposedly they gain time. They become younger by a few seconds.
Of course.
Well, yeah, there's that.
So what if there's a phenomenon with water, too?
Yeah.
Maybe
Maybe people aren't really lost like when they say for days or months, whatever, with the Bermuda Triangle. Maybe this is something really a phenomenon with the oceans.
Oh, speaking of which, I've got to ask a side question. I don't want to digress too much, but it's a good point, Jonathan. Which is, I'm not dismissing you in any way, shape, or form. No, I got to get this question.
It never feels like that until you point it out. Go ahead.
Why? I never liked you. No, what I was going to say was because the Bermuda Triangle, because I always wanted to ask, does the Navy avoid that area, or do they just plow right through it?
Honestly, I could not say. It's never been mentioned that I actually went through it, so I couldn't talk about that.
Is it something the guys kind of whisper about? After that whole Navy thing with Flight 19 years and years ago, and then they lost that pontoon plane. I think it was like an Osprey class or something like that years ago. Did you hear?
We hear about stuff like that. It's like mentioned in brevity, like real light, discussion, but it's not like a big facet that we ever talk about. And it's definitely not something that people are like all up on the fence about, like, oh my God, make sure that we, avoid this area. Because I've been down through the Caribbean area plenty of times on deployments and stuff like that. And you would think if it's that serious, everyone up there would be on the bridge, like, making sure that these guys that are navigating are like, hey, make sure you don't put us over here.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Even the old timers would be like, just double checking things every once in a while. I was like, where are we again? Let's get back to this though, because you mentioned something that we haven't touched on yet, which is you were saying that when you're south of the equator, you ran into things that kind of fit in with the models that we've been discussing for the last 6-7 months, which is distances seem to be out of whack when you get well, on a globe it's south of the equator, but on a flat map it's out in the outer ring. Is that something you can you elaborate on that?
It's something that actually makes perfect sense to me, because it actually took longer a lot of times to get to an area whenever we are tracking and making sure that we're on a proper course to get to a certain area like Costa Rica or Guyana or Suriname or something like that. It took a lot longer to get there than what I thought it was going to, because they said, oh yeah, we go such and such fast, and I'm like, I've looked this up in retrospect, like how long it's actually plotted to be, and it should have taken like about 3 or 4 days less than what it actually took.
Oh, I got you.
Like, yeah. So it was much longer.
Yeah, which is what we've been looking at, with the plane routes, and a lot of people have, they've been bugging me. I've gotten emails every week about shipping lanes, because there's some commercial traffic shipping tracker things you can do, and I said, look, it takes way too long to track that stuff, and as ships have that innate ability to, if the port is crowded, they're just put on hold and they just stop, which planes can't do. They'll just shut it down and they'll just sit out in the middle of the water until they can get into port, and that screws up.
You can't judge it very well by that.
No,
because they have to stop.
But you're part of a group that does do these long things, and you're saying that the shipping lanes, the distances are screwed up out there. Is that pretty much the summary?
That is, and on top of the fact that anytime ever we've ever had to go from East Coast over on the West Coast,
Yeah.
you would think like, hey, we're already down in South America. Why don't we just go around the bottom tip of South America and come back up? We're
Okay.
already down here, but no matter what, we always cut back up to Panama and use that asset, the
Oh,
canal.
so even if you're further, even when you're that far south, instead of just going around the Horn, they always divert you back to Panama?
Always, always.
Was there any explanation for this?
No, it just always happened.
That's weird. Other
Wow.
than what we were talking about, and that is once you get around the Horn, you at that point everything is so distorted on the outer map that the distance would be way, way longer. That if you
Extremely
went around
longer.
I mean, even longer than going around the Horn is what I'm saying. Is that
Yes.
but yeah, you're the distance is 20-30% longer than you would even expect, and so somebody at the higher levels, maybe it's above that. I don't know who gives the fleet orders, but somebody at that high level knows that, oh yeah, to save time, you got to go up through Panama. Even though you could be 200 miles from the Horn, you're going back up. You're going to backtrack and go through Panama.
Yes. And
Wow.
that's really something to be said. And just to talk about how bad things get distorted, anyone can go look this up.
Hmm.
Go look. I challenge everyone right now, and this is one experiment that I actually wanted to talk about.
Sure. Go ahead.
Uh, Everyone that believes in the globular model, go out and buy a globe and look at how big Greenland is compared to Africa.
Hmm.
And on a globe, they look about the same size.
Yeah.
And that's said to be our accurate depiction of what the world looks like.
Yeah.
This isn't me claiming this. This is the upper echelon claiming that this is what our world looks like.
Yeah.
Now, go do some survey study and find out how big Greenland actually is. And what the reason why I bring this up is because Greenland, if you believe in the AE model,
Hmm.
the flat model,
Hmm.
it's actually much closer to the tighter center of the plane,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And Africa is much further out.
Yep.
Greenland, it would surprise people that Greenland's like almost 9 times smaller than Africa.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Excellent
that
point.
should say something.
Yeah. 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 The Mercator map. Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. In fact, I just did a thing on it on the last clues, which was the Mercator map, which has not been changed in 500 years. It was done by a guy in Germany, Mercator. All the geography people know that that map is wrong and that the Gall Peters map is more correct, and yet you cannot get the Gall Peters map into schools
Yep.
because people are more comfortable with the other one.
Yeah, and that's why I mentioned that because we talk about going past the equator
Hmm.
or the equatorial line.
Yeah.
They have to distort land masses like that on those maps because if they don't, it doesn't account for their sphere
Yeah.
of the actual physical location of that landmass, and that's why they had to make Greenland so much bigger to account for the curve.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd read the origins on the Mercator map, and they said it was, ironically enough, because it was made shipping easier. It was all
Yeah.
done. It was all done for ships, and which is wow. I'm so happy, Robert, by the way that you're talking about this because it's great. I want to recap a few things. Jonathan, before I recap anything, did you have any more questions or?
No. This is just again.
Yeah,
I'm in
no.
that fascination mode. I'm like, wow.
Yeah. Let's recap real quick. This is Robert from the United States Navy. He is a NATO Sea Sparrow surface missile system instructor and master training specialist. He's currently not on tour. You're actually currently right now. For how much longer? You're teaching people on the Sparrow system. You're teaching recruits.
I'm teaching recruits that have already been through boot camp and their A school that I went through at one point. They're
Got
done
it.
with A school and now they're in my specialized school.
Got it. Got it. And then sometime after this, and again, we don't have to go into great detail. You're going back out. You're going back out on tour.
Yes, I will be heading back to my sea tour here in a few months.
Wow. Wow. I'm so glad we got a chance to talk to you right now. Just so we got what, a minute and a half before break. The things we're talking about tonight, this great guy from the United States Navy is basically saying that, he was out there and he has access to technology that most people don't have, and it's in very specific technology that deal with weapon systems and long range sight and long range target acquisition. And he's basically saying, one, there's no curvature of the Earth at all that he can see. He can see ships at 27 nautical miles, which is, we're going to have to do the equation maybe on their break, that equates out to what, 35? Oh, hey, we're going to break. And when we back, talk about flat Earth experiments.
Strange World with Mark Sargent. Saturdays on Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome back to Strange World, segment 4, the last segment. I'm your host, Mark Sargent, creator of Flat Earth Clues. With me, wingman Jonathan, and our very special guest, who I'd like to thank once again, Robert from the United States Navy. He is a NATO Sea Sparrow surface missile system instructor and a master training specialist, and he's basically saying, there's flat. He was out there with all sorts of great, fun technology. What was that line from Batman? Where does he get all these wonderful toys? Robert had all these wonderful toys, and he used them all. And in hindsight, he's looking back and saying, you know what? I never saw a curve once. And it's all just a myth. It's all just something that's been passed down from generation to generation, seaman to seaman. And we're on with him now. You still with us, Robert?
Yep, right here.
But
Cool.
by the way, Mark,
Yeah.
I'm terrible with that equation that everybody talks about.
Which one?
The,
Curvature?
for calculating the curvature of the Earth. I was trying to explain it to my son today.
It is 8 inches per mile squared. And when you hear that, it sounds wrong. And Sean
Right.
knows. I'm sorry, Robert knows this one. Crap. The where it is 8 inches times every mile. Every mile times itself. So at mile 2, it's 2 times 2, which is 4, times 8 inches, which is 32 inches. 3 times 3, 3 miles is 3 times 3 is 9 times 8 inches, which is 72 inches.
That's
So
at the second mile. The second mile is
well, the first mile is nothing. It's just 8 inches.
Okay.
The second mile is 2 times 2 times 8. The third mile is 3 times 3 times 8. 4 times 4 times 8. 5 times 5. So it goes up pretty quick. To where when you get out to 50 miles, you're up at, 1,700 feet,
Yeah.
which is a lot. So it again, and that's if the curvature is real, which is why people keep talking. Again, most people, you see all that, you've seen all the experiments, Robert, where people are on the beach and they're just, have binoculars and cameras on the beach and they're showing this, but you're out in the middle of the ocean where you can see in all directions and you have reference points, which is even better. You have ships at the limits of everything in all directions. You're saying at nautical miles, which is longer than land miles, you're seeing ships that should not even begin. They should be long gone. And not only are you seeing them, but you're hitting them with 2-inch beam radar. You're tracking missiles to them. And you can see them with infrared on top of that, which also should not be possible at all, because if it's a mirage, infrared should not be able to see it, especially at night.
Can I ask Robert a question?
Yeah.
So at a distance, right? Because again, I've never seen anything 30 feet, 30 miles away or 15 nautical miles away. You know what I mean? Because we don't have any of that on land. So when you're looking that far away, do things just start to get like fuzzier and fuzzier until they fade out? Almost like the only thing I can equate to is like when you see a mirage on a hot summer road.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is that way. Like the further and further you look out, when you actually see, that distance at the horizon, it just becomes hazy. And a lot of that, like I've done a study on this myself, the maximum perceivable viewpoint of a human being, is limited. And a lot of it has to do with humidity in the air. The fact that whenever the sun shines, you have a much shorter viewpoint during the daylight than you do at night, because
Right.
the sun casts that, that attribute on the horizon. You can't see anything. It becomes really grainy, and you can even see that with clouds.
But let me ask you one other question before you go into that. Not to sound like I'm telling a joke, because I'm always making jokes. Seeing things at night, and you would say, well, you need light to see at night, right? So you have your goggles. But like at first thing in the morning, 6 a.m., I don't know if this is true for oceans, but usually the water is like glass on the, like local inlets and rivers and such. Is it because the sun heats up the water that creates the tides? And with that, I know there's again, stupid question. Do you ever get what's considered zero humidity days, what you consider to be clear days across the water?
I was going to ask that anyway.
Oh, were you? Okay.
Actually. We do. And it's funny because we actually we use that forecast to see how much of a maximum distance we're going to be able to view out at sea. It actually affects our visibility. And that's something that's actually briefed when we're out at sea. We actually talk about how far we're going to be able to see ships based upon weather conditions.
So, in your opinion, what is the best atmospheric conditions for seeing long distances over water?
I would say the best condition that I've seen is actually at nighttime.
Okay.
Whether it be with an infrared camera or some type of telescopic device, or just a regular set of binoculars, because if there's any light source at all on the ship, and I've seen cargo ships with they always have to have their lights on during their trade routes, and I've seen them at great distances with no problem.
Oh, Mark.
What?
I got a great question.
What? Ask.
He's out at sea, right? So he's out there when there's full moon and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you think there's colder spots on the ship in the shade of the moonlight?
That's Jonathan jokes.
Something that's something I actually want to test myself one day. I really do.
Yeah.
That is definitely something that I've heard about.
Wait, it sounds like I'm kidding
I would
again.
love to test.
No,
It sounds like I'm kidding, but wait, no, soil and stuff retains heat, and there's different levels of heat, right? If you went in the desert, you would have a different effect because the sand and stuff doesn't retain heat. So he has an awesome opportunity because he's on a ship that's mostly metal and whatever the hell it's made out of, and he's got the sea, so he's got two more things to factor in that we don't have uniquely.
No, you get a point there, and you're right. Once the temperature gets normalized on the ship, you couldn't do it, right away. But yeah, once it got normalized, that'd be a great test bed.
Yeah,
the guys next to
something that I actually was gonna do.
Really, out at sea.
I'm doing it again.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was talking about with the experiments. I'm going back to the sea here in a few months. I have quite a few different things I plan on doing while I'm out there, and once I have them completed, I'm definitely getting back to you guys with what I find.
Let's talk about it, because that's the we're in the last segment, so this is your time. So one of them is going to be the moonlight test.
One of them is going to be the moonlight test and its properties of whether it's cooler in the shade or whatever effect it has.
Bring a magnifying glass, by the way.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Concentrate it. Yep. All right. Yep. Another one I have is I plan on having more of a mapping of constellations on how they actually affect as far as like how they orient themselves whenever there's no land obstructions, there's no trees, hills, any of that stuff.
Okay.
I plan on doing that out there because there's plenty of places where I can fix something where it won't move.
Okay.
And another thing I planned on doing was actually doing a deeper study on how back before GPS and all that stuff came out, how people used to navigate by the sea. Because one thing, by the stars, when they were out to sea, because one thing that got me started on all of this, like I said earlier in the show, was the fact that there's no parallax shift of constellations. And if there were, wouldn't that be a really faulty system to navigate by when you're out at sea.
Good
Like
point.
if constellations were just like going all over the place, how were people using that for thousands of years to very accurately navigate and circumnavigate from, continent to continent? How are
You're
they
right.
able to do that?
Oh yeah.
You're right. If the stars were moving in parallax, yeah, you're absolutely right, because that adds a whole. I mean, multiple orders of magnitude in terms of complexity. Your older civilization or your older societies wouldn't have been able to do it, not on their own. It would have driven them mad. They would have spent all their days working with the math, and they never would have figured it out.
Yep,
If it
they
was
would
that.
have been more concerned with, okay, well, how much do we have to account for now since we're 6 months on the other side of the sun?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It makes it way more difficult. So you're right. So and that confirms what we were talking about at the beginning of the show. And I don't want to let. I want to make sure people don't forget. As soon as you get that rendered and I can process it on my side, I am going to upload a test that you did, where you basically rigged up kind of a makeshift a gun barrel and pointed it at the Polaris, right?
Yes.
And then set a time lapse. Here's dedication, folks, as far as testing goes, and set up a time lapse with a camera. And a couple frames a day, pretty much, or how
I would let it run all throughout the night, and I would come get it the next morning.
really? How
Yes.
I mean, how long? Seriously? So you were how many? So that's 5.5 months times what? 8 hours a night?
But it is time lapse though.
Oh, okay.
It's sped up. Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, so you did that for 5.5 months, and you're saying Polaris didn't move. And I know the excuse the astronomers and astrophysicists are going to come out and say, well, because it's so far away, we wouldn't be able to detect it. But that should not really be the case. Not if we're spinning around the sun, and that sun is also moving through space with the entire solar system.
And that's my biggest point. If anyone doesn't understand what we're talking about right now, let me just make this layman for you.
Okay.
If we are pointing on, what is it, a 33.3 degree axis, roughly?
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
If we are pointed towards the Polaris star and we're orbiting, you have to take into consideration that by the time we get on the other side of the sun, our North Pole does not shift in a sense of, oh, let me flip all the way back over and point at the star again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I did it for 5.5 months. My apparatus on my roof didn't move. Right?
Yeah.
It stayed pointing at it. So as we're traveling around the sun, how all of a sudden wasn't it like 180 degrees off and like on the other side of the sky whenever I went and looked out?
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And you never see that. And that's the biggest thing for me is like, well, if we're truly orbiting 350 million miles, eventually our axis will be pointing away from the Polaris star.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen.
Wow.
That makes
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
incredible. You've got so much good stuff. It's going to take me a while to process it all, but it's fantastic. Again, I can't thank you enough for being here. Quick, what other tests were you thinking of that you had on that you were going to take with you, basically back to your Navy ship, and hopefully not freak out your friends?
I was actually going to bring a very high-powered laser, as high as I could.
Okay.
Commercially, and I was actually going to do some testing for range finding pointed at ships across the horizon and see how far they actually are away.
Nice.
Because a laser doesn't lie.
Well, no, it doesn't. But I've got to quote Jaronism from his tests. But there is some, depending on what kind of laser you use, and you may have better access than most people. You get. What was it? A 2.5 foot dispersion on commercial lasers per mile. So
Yes,
the beam gets really wide. Are you going to be able to compensate for that?
I have a few ideas. I have a few.
You don't want to give them away, though.
Not yet, because I want this to kind of be exclusive to me. I will be completely transparent about it once I do it, though.
Oh, cool.
With all my findings on it. But I have a couple ideas on how to compensate for that dispersion, considering my background.
Oh, neat. That's intriguing. Well, the laser test is really cool. But I mean, let's be honest here. Do you really need it after all? I mean, for you, I know you want as much reinforcement as you can, but
This isn't for me. This is for the skeptics out there.
oh, I gotcha.
I talk about infrared. Not every person has access to infrared.
Yeah.
This is for the skeptics that think, there's no way he's,
Yeah.
being legitimate about this.
People also don't have access to a military grade 2-inch beam radar, high powered radar
Exactly.
as well. The very few people have that. I haven't had one for years. So
I know. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I have a feeling I know how he's going to overcome the dispersion issue.
Really? That'll be cool.
He's going to pulse it.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Okay. Yeah.
You do this?
Pulse wave modulation.
Yep. It accounts for dispersion.
Yeah.
You pulled the cat out of the bag on that one.
I'm sorry.
Every
edit it
day.
out. Edit it out.
Every day.
No. It's
No,
fine.
no,
You
let's
can
leave
leave
it
it in. You can leave it in. Pulse wave modulation. I'll just go ahead and
I'm
explain
sorry.
it because no, you're fine. Really, because not everyone can do this. I'm pretty background in computer scripting and language and writing programs too. It's one thing that I do. And I've actually been designing software to be able to accurately control pulsing a laser so I can compensate for dispersion. Because when you can modulate a wavelength, you add these things to it called stepping bits. Right. And basically when you receive it back, it accounts for any type of dispersion whenever you receive it back.
Right. In waveform, you would call that collision, I guess. But in this case, you could probably even get it to go further distance or further strength if it's like a standing wave. If I don't know if it works that way with laser, but I know you can do that with other things.
I plan on giving it a carrier wave too.
Right.
So.
Okay. Cool.
Every week, you amaze me more and more.
Hey, Mark, we all have a past,
Apparently. When you said that you were my handler, I'm not supposed
I told
to
you
take.
They kicked me out of the service. They said, "You want to go to crypto?" I said, "No." Anyway,
why am I teaming up with you? Okay, so
I chose you.
Yes, you did, which worries me even more. Why aren't people going after this guy? Go after Jonathan. Don't go after me.
I always pay them off. That's why.
Why did you not make Eric's top enemies list? Why aren't you even on that list?
Anyway.
Yeah, but we digress. Wow, okay. What else you got? I mean, are you taking anything else out to the boat besides these fun things?
Actually, I'm actually planning on taking anyone that knows about old naval instruments knows what I'm talking about when I mention a clinometer.
I got nothing.
It has to do with the measure to the top of a mast of a ship.
Okay.
From the horizon level.
Yeah.
And that was how you got distance back in the day. And basically what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to set it up to where I use a clinometer in conjunction with an infrared camera.
Yeah.
And I'm actually going to see how far it is using basic trigonometry, mainly tangent formulations. But all I'm getting at with that, if that's going over anyone's head, is beyond a shadow of a doubt, you're going to be able to calculate how far something is away visually and by angular measurement.
Okay.
And I'm going to show all my findings with that too. I plan on doing a full video about that one. That's one. Another one has to deal with, different altitude measurements. I plan on doing a balloon test myself. I know quite a few other people have already done it.
And there's that big one coming up in 4 days. Yeah.
That Jaren's got. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking forward to seeing that one. But I have a few things. Some of them not even going to bother mentioning because I'm still kind of conceptualizing them right now.
Okay.
Seeing if they're valid, whether or not they're a strong point to mention. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got on the.
Oh, really?
Right
yeah.
now.
Yeah. Just kind of matter of fact. Yeah. He's going to do some pulse wave modulation on some lasers because he's going to write the software for that. And he's going to take pictures with an infrared camera, at distance, yeah. Wow. Wow. Where have you been all this time? Seriously. We could
drinking the Kool-Aid like everybody else.
Yeah. Did you well,
They
better
serve Kool-Aid in the military? I thought it was Tang.
That's for astronauts. Oh, wait. No, no, it's not because there are no astronauts. The quick question for you. That's Stanley Kubrick, by the way, got in on that Tang joke. I love
Yeah.
that. And, the was there an aha moment more than the Polaris star thing? Was there anything else, or was that because I think I told you most people their aha moment is it's something completely different. It's something much more basic, but yours was in the sky, which is
Yeah, it was.
that was it. The Polaris stars, like you saw that and it's like, yep, that's what it is.
The sky has a lot more answers than the ground does, in my opinion. And just to kind of close with this, think about this, everyone listening. If you look up at the sky, you can consider the constellation parallax. That's one argument. You
Yeah.
can consider how perfectly coincidental it is that the moon, basically
Fits over
covers
the
the
sun.
sun during an eclipse, supposedly 400 times further away, but
Yep.
400 times bigger.
Yep.
And, and that's such a funny claim to make, considering that, globalists believe that the Big Bang and all that stuff happened, and everything was random. Well, it was so random, it just perfectly matched up. Come on now.
Yeah.
Another thing to consider in the sky is I love math. I love real math in the sense that what's observable, not making some type of formula just to fit my, agenda. I believe in matching math to empirical evidence. And one thing that's great is trigonometry and geometry. If you look at the sun, when it shines through the clouds or when it shines above the clouds, you can see the actual angular light path that it takes in that phenomenon. And for that to happen, if you actually think about it, it must be much closer than what they're actually claiming it is, because you couldn't get, angles like that from something that far away. Something that far away would just kind of blanket everything.
Exactly.
And,
Rory Cooper touched on that from my perspective. He's really big on the angles of the sun. Yeah, that's great stuff.
And it makes a huge difference, whenever you actually think about it that way.
Yeah.
I could say one thing to that if you want me to.
Go ahead.
What's that?
Yeah, unless you have layers of clouds. Because if they're staggered, much like a filter, almost like picture a checkerboard on top of a checkerboard, right? So you cut out all the black spaces, right?
Yeah.
And so the sun's not coming directly from behind that layer of clouds, or it would be exactly like you said, straight lines or whatever the angle would be.
Yeah.
But if you have different layers of clouds, then where it's blocking in between the bottom layer, the bottommost layer, the light's going to kind of askew. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I've thought about that as well.
But for
Now,
you're
I
saying
didn't use the
by
checkerboard.
yeah, but for what you're saying, by and large, it does seem that way. That it seems to go angular from a lower projection outward, away or
Yes.
in different directions.
Not to mention, but another thing to consider is the moon. It's much easier to see, and this is where people are going to think, well, okay, we're all wearing tinfoil hats, but you can go do this yourself. Go get a camera that has a decent ISO function that adjusts for light when you're filming, and there's this great video that this woman did that showed clouds actually being visible behind the moon.
Oh yeah,
I saw those.
I've seen that. Yeah.
That was amazing to me. I was like, you have to be kidding. And I went and I scrutinized it. I actually brought it into Photoshop and saw if any tinkering was being done with it. I couldn't find anything. And I'm very, very skilled with Photoshop. Like, I know how all that stuff works. And it was a raw footage. There was nothing changed with it at all. And it was amazing to me because as soon as she focused back on the moon, anyone that knows about intensity, and I know I'm talking to a photographer in this show, Jonathan.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, it was a
When you
bizarre
focus
video.
on the moon, it lights up and it blacks out everything in the backdrop.
Yep.
That's what happens when your eyes focus on a light source.
Yeah.
But when she turned away from that and caught the low light levels of the clouds behind it, it was actually going behind it. And you can prove that because the moon is a solid object for all intents and purposes from what we can tell. But yeah, that was something I was just blown away with if we're talking about other things other than just the constellation that put me over the edge.
Wow.
Yeah, I was a little disturbed by that video too because I watched it several times in a row and I'm like, my head started hurting. I couldn't think anymore on it. And now I have
Yeah.
to go back. Now that you brought it up, I should revisit it. But
Now I'm gonna have to watch that again because I had several people send that to me, and the Sun version. The Sun version is
Yes.
a little harder to watch, and you're a lot more skeptical of the Sun version.
you know what's
But
good? You know what's good though? She kept the camera steady, even though she was talking. Some of these people, I curse up a storm. Like, hold the damn camera steady. Get a tripod. Put it
Yeah.
on your car. Whatever you
Yeah.
have to do. Jack it up with a wallet in front. But no, this woman did a really good job at filming and tracking this thing.
wow,
Yeah, she really did, and it was amazing to me. And for anyone that's not picking up what we're putting down, the clouds were behind the moon, meaning that the moon is not out in space
yeah,
like we think it is.
yeah. Yeah, and you know what? I respect your opinion more than most because you've had access. And again, we've got a few minutes left here. I'm going to give you some parting shots, but first, a quick review. This is an active guy in the United States Navy, been in for 10 years. Done a 5-year tour. He's training people on the NATO Sea Sparrow surface missile system. He's a master training specialist, and he has access to toys that most people do not have access to. If anyone wants to refute him in any way, you're going to probably have to come from his background, because I don't know how you're going to be able to, to shoot his stuff down. When he comes out and says, no, I have not seen any curvature of the earth. I can see things that are a lot farther away than even people on the beach here that are doing tests are, that there's no Coriolis effect in the firing system, and that the navigation seems completely wrong. I mean, some of the examples you've given are staggering, including one I've never even heard of, which was showing up at port 2 days before he should be showing up. How does that happen? So, so you're going to be around for the next few months, and then you're heading back out. Are you, if you don't mind me asking, are you still playing? I mean, is the Navy? You've been in 10 years. That usually kind of signals career. Are you planning on going career until they give you a Section 8?
Yeah, I really do. I plan on it, mainly because outside of the aspect of, whoever might be covering something up, that's not really important to me. It's just a means of, providing for the family.
Yeah, I cannot thank you enough for getting the word out, Jonathan. You got any parting shots for Robert before we?
I got nothing.
Really?
Does that happen a lot?
No, it doesn't, and I think he's lying on top of it. We caught him with the wave modulation thing. He probably wasn't supposed to talk about that, and now he's just feigning ignorance, that's fine too. That's totally fine.
I have a career to worry about and a pension too.
Don't tell me things.
It's not
like
easy
that.
to work out here in the private sector. I don't like it.
So, in our last minute, real quick, I'm going to put up the video that Robert's going to give me where he shot Polaris in a time lapse for 5.5 months, and we'll do it. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you,
See
Robert.
you next time.
Thank you.